Good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us on Sustainability Live. I'm your host, Mark Westwind. Thank you very much for taking some time to join us. Our topic tonight is food security and food justice in Contra Costa County. With the COVID-19 pandemic, has come a heightened awareness about our vulnerabilities individually and as a society. Most of us are blessed and privileged to have easy and affordable access to high quality food. But that's not true for many people in our county. It's important for us to know what's going on in terms of food security and food justice, the issues that have haunted us for many years, and to learn more about how we can help. Our first guest tonight is John Gioia. John is a member of the Contra Costa Board of Supervisors representing District 1, which includes the cities of Richmond, El Cerrito, San Pablo, and El Sobrante. John has been an active and vocal advocate for food security and food justice for many years. John is also a longtime friend of Sustainable Contra Costa. Welcome, John. Thank you for joining us.
Great. Thanks to having me, and thanks to everybody out there, all the panelists who are doing great work with your organizations on a very important topic. So let me just provide a little context, and I will make my comments brief because I think the real value here is the conversation that we are going to have about this. So, you know, I am from Richmond. I grew up in Richmond, and there are parts of Richmond that often have been called food deserts. However, the landscape is changing. And I'm happy to say that there's been a lot of great advocacy around this issue, and it has been elevated by many in the community. You know, if you look at San Pablo Avenue, which is sort of a major thoroughfare in West Contra Costa, there is only one, which is sort of the heart of Richmond, is west of San Pablo Avenue, the original part of Richmond. There is only one supermarket west of San Pablo Avenue, and that's a Foods Co. And over the years, what happened over a period of a couple of decades, the large supermarkets closed. And the unfortunate thing about that is that it resulted in less available fresh produce to communities, and they're predominantly African American and Latino communities. And what has happened is these supermarkets have been replaced now that once existed with smaller family-owned markets. So the bad news is large supermarkets, which tended to have lower prices, not all the time, but often tended to have lower prices and lots of availability, closed. And smaller markets, which often have higher prices, but not always, have begun to sort of multiply around parts of Richmond. So that's the good news. And that you're seeing this community growth. But for a time, it was easier, you know, I think things have changed, to get alcohol and liquor than to get fresh produce in some of those neighborhoods because of the proliferation of liquor stores. Right. And between policies that both we implemented at the county for the unincorporated areas like North Richmond, and the city of Richmond, of putting more limits on the growth of liquor stores, and really trying to encourage land use policies for more markets. And the effect of that, clearly, I don't need to tell you all of this, when you don't have access to healthy foods and healthy produce that's convenient and reasonable, it affects people's health and their well-being. And I know your topic is this intersection between race and food security. And there clearly is, in many cases, some of these larger markets, the large corporate supermarkets, made decisions that they felt either they weren't making enough profit. I remember once talking to someone I went to high school with, Bill Andronico, who owned Andronico's Markets. I think he lives in Lafayette, and Bill grew up in El Cerrito, and talking to him about this issue of how come there aren't more supermarkets, and he would talk about the sort of the formula that many of these large markets used, which was drawing a circle around the store, looking at the income levels of people who live in that neighborhood, and then computing how much of that income is spendable income on groceries and food, and then determining whether that would be a profitable market. So if you think about that, right, they've been making decisions on where to keep open stores or where to locate a new store based upon the income level of people who live in a neighborhood. That clearly it is not an issue of, is not achieved what we would think of as equity and equality in our society. So just the decision-making process alone, right, is based on inequality and inequity. So the smaller markets began to develop and create greater opportunity for people to get fresh produce. So that is good. And most of these are actually in many of them are Latino-owned markets, where they will display the fresh produce outdoors, which has been a really great thing to see in neighborhoods and more attractive even than a supermarket inside. And so there's been a lot of community discussion in West Contra Costa and Richmond about creating, if large corporations aren't going to locate more larger food outlets, how to create our own sort of destiny with regard to food. And so I've been working with an organization called Urban Tilth. Some of you may be aware of them. And Urban Tilth is a great nonprofit in Richmond. You can Google them and see their great work. The county has provided them 3 acres of land in North Richmond and a fair amount of funding, and they're getting funding from others to build an urban farm to grow, to really do several things, to grow fresh produce, preferably organic, but not always, and help supply it to families, especially families in need. And as part of that, they've set up a CSA program. In fact, our offices used to be one of the pickup points before the pandemic, where people, this is a great model that's developing, where there's, and I subscribe to it. I pay, I think it's $25 per box. You can get it once a week or once every 2 weeks. And your funding helps subsidize and support another family. So you're getting your box of fresh produce, and your funding helps support another family that cannot pay the full market price, that pays less. So it's a way we're helping each other out. So the farm, because it's not fully developed, doesn't raise all the produce that's in the box. It also sources it as locally as possible from around Contra Costa County. But the farm, really the whole purpose of the farm is to build an ethic of environmental stewardship, education about nutrition, education about where our food comes from, stewardship of the environment, and to develop some work opportunities for young people. In fact, they have a summer internship program going on this summer. But and I encourage you to take a look at it. It's a great model where we're achieving education about nutrition and health and even recipes of how to cook food, and then supporting it through subscribing to the box, getting the produce, and supporting other families who have less. I think we're actually, one of their visions is trying to develop a community-owned market. And we've been looking at models in other parts of the country where the community itself owns a market, and therefore its policies, how it pays and treats its workers, the kinds of products it sells are all supportive of greater community values. So we're hoping to move into that model and expand. But I think what this tells us is that there is a greater recognition between, right, the food we eat and our health and our ability to be to also feed our families. And what's happened, if you look at West Contra Costa, because such a large percentage of students are from low-income families and qualify for free or reduced lunch program, that when the schools closed during the pandemic and did distance learning, many of the schools set up sites for young people to be able to come and get their free or reduced cost lunch. So that it shows you how much many families were relying on our schools, which is, in a way, it's positive the schools are there, but it's a sad commentary that that's what we have to do. That we have to, that we're in a situation where people don't have the money to be able to support a food budget. We have seen, in fact, in Contra Costa County, an overwhelming increase in our CalFresh food stamp enrollment program during this pandemic. It's been a major increase because of people losing their work or working less and having less income. But so the schools were a major source of providing food. What we're hoping to do, I consider this part of a larger issue about racial equity and racial justice in Contra Costa, and the county departments have a major role to play. And actually, Supervisor Federal Glover and I've been talking to a number in the community, a number of organizations and individuals, and have put a proposal together to set up an Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice at the county that is directly accountable to the public and the Board of Supervisors, and works both throughout our departments in creating a culture of change, both from our departments, like our health department, which deals with health disparities, our Employment and Human Services department that clearly covers social services, our land use folks, which make land use decisions that have environmental justice impacts in communities, to our justice departments, DA, sheriff, public defender, probation. So if you think about it, county government touches the justice system. It touches our health system, including food systems. It touches social services and land use. And we're actually hoping, we're actually talking to foundations about working with the county to create a community planning process. So whatever concepts we've already developed are really going to be subject to a community voice and a community partnership or community process that really informs how this office should be established. While it may be set up in the county administrator's office because it has the greatest leverage over other departments and accountable to the board and the public, what's really the right way to do this? Other cities and counties have some similar models, but we want to make ours much more community-based and hear from the community. And I think, frankly, that can address issues of land use policies or health policies that of closing the food security gap, and what are the policies we can implement. It comes down to for example, we just recently helped fund the construction of a number of affordable below market rate units in North Richmond with a nonprofit housing developer. And to complete that project, we've identified funding to actually build on the site a grocery store, a real full service grocery store for that community that does not sell alcohol. Because we've realized that is really important to having a complete community. And we raise money every year for the food bank, and the Contra Costa Alameda Food Bank is a great organization. They do amazing work. But think about this. Isn't it sad that we have to do a food drive every holiday season?
Right.
And I remember once Larry Sly, who's since retired as exec director, said, and I agree with him wholeheartedly, that we wish for the day that the food bank goes out of business.
Right.
That if we could put the same effort, think about the effort we're all putting in every holiday season to raise money for the food bank. If that effort, similar effort and excitement is put into food security issues of inequality, and people are able to then have the income to be able to afford food, we'd be in a way better off than the efforts we go through to plug the gaps. Because that's all that we're doing, is we're just plugging this gap and filling holes, with water spilling out. When we do that, we're not solving and creating a better system. So I'm hopeful that we, as a county, we're really continue to be committed to trying to do that. So with that, I'll stop, and because again, we'll have a conversation, but I wanted to provide some framing.
Good.
And also some ideas of what things we've been working on.
Excellent. Thank you, John. A couple of questions. Number one, you mentioned the CSA kind of, you subscribe and somebody, and you're supporting someone else. Is that a model that any of our audience could contribute to? In other words, how would they get in touch with that CSA? Maybe they could sponsor somebody. Can you give us the name of that CSA?
Well, that's a great, I mean, like anything, you have to grow these and not grow too fast.
Right.
So if folks live in West Contra Costa County, that publicizing this to friends in West Contra Costa, because that's where the delivery happens now.
Mm-hmm.
I think over time, the goal is to expand it out. But right now, the capacity is to focus on the greater Richmond and West Contra Costa area. And yes, you can support it. I mean, clearly you can make a contribution and support a family. What you could do is you could pay for a box. You could, if you could pick it up in West Contra Costa, and if that doesn't work, you can donate it. But you can choose to do that. But if you know anyone in West Contra Costa who wants to subscribe, that would be great. And we'll see if it can grow beyond West Contra Costa. We want to serve those needs first. And actually, what I'd suggest you do is look at the Urban Tilt website, and there's opportunities to participate and help. They talk about the North Richmond Farm Project. They talk about the CSA program. And what's amazing when you go to an event there is the diversity of young people who are there, who are getting a connection with the land, learning about health, learning about nutrition and food, and getting some career opportunities as well, and leadership.
Cool. Another follow-up is that you mentioned community markets, and I was very active in the Berkeley co-op chain and the Walnut Creek and Pleasant Hill co-ops back in the day. They've since gone under. I don't hear co-op used as frequently. I know it takes a lot of time and effort to put a co-op together. Is community market in effect a renaming of the same concept? And why hasn't that really flourished out there?
It's, and Doria Robinson, the executive director of Urban Tilt, has been traveling and visiting some successful models, and she and I have talked about one. I was interested in seeing one that's, I think she said it's in North Carolina. It's back east on the East Coast, and she differentiated. So it was a market that was, there are some models that are owned by the workers and employees. This model that they're exploring is owned by the community in some way, so, which is an interesting model where there's community ownership, and then the advantage of that is that, and I'm not familiar with all the details. I'm going to go back and visit one with her at the right time. Is that the community then feels invested. Like I do a lot of shopping at El Cerrito Natural Grocery, which is sort of a type of worker owned. I think it's employee stock ownership. It's a different. It's maybe not as robust, but it's been there a while. There's Berkeley and El Cerrito Natural Grocery. It's the same sort of outfit. But so the idea of a community market is one that there's more community-wide investment to help build up where people feel invested in its success. So it goes beyond even the ownership by workers, and then uses it. You need a lot of financing for this, right?
Right.
And oftentimes some of the highest margin items are things like liquor and tobacco. And the idea is not wanting to sell tobacco, and two, limiting the kind of alcohol you may sell. So in fact, I remember talking to some who wanted to move into a market in North Richmond, and they wanted to sell where there's already liquor stores, and they wanted to sell liquor, and we said, no, you can't. So it made them walk away. So we need help if we're trying to promote good, healthy food sustainability, to be able to support a model that it does not have to rely on lots of liquor sales or tobacco sales at all. So that would be the idea. But what I'll close with this. I remember I would get a lot of calls from folks wanting to come in and do studies and say, Richmond's a food desert, and there's no supermarkets. And my response was, as now there are these smaller family-owned markets, I said, that's correct. I think that there's no supermarkets except one, and that's an unfortunate indication of their decision-making process. But we need to acknowledge, raise up, and support the many family-owned markets that have developed around, that have really helped turn Richmond into something other than a food desert. There's still some neighborhoods that don't have as much, But I want to acknowledge and give credit to those family-owned markets that are really working hard to supply their community, and they're also there, and many of them, have greater cultural competency at the work they do than a supermarket does,
Right.
and their prices aren't necessarily more depending on the market. I don't know about you, but last time I don't shop at Safeway anymore. The last time I went into a Safeway, it's always so large to find things, but it was
Right.
also more expensive than other places like even El Cerrito Natural Grocery, with its fresh organic produce.
That's a great place. I stop there often when I'm in your part of the West County. Well, I have a question about the economy of scale for all those smaller markets. Obviously, they don't have the buying clout that a Safeway does and so forth.
Yeah.
The Berkeley Co-op chain was member owned. It wasn't
Right.
employees were part of that. But do you see any collaboration or cooperation among the small markets to look at cooperatively buying to keep the prices down?
That's a really great observation, because that's one of the disadvantages they have, is that they're not able to have the same buying power as a large market. In fact, you see some of them go into Costco, believe it or not, to stock up on certain items because of Costco's pricing, but and then take it back to their market. Yeah, I think that's sort of the obstacle we need to overcome, is how do we create a mechanism, which really means changing our system, of having there be an opportunity for these markets to work together, which they traditionally have not. And we're not set up in that way. And it takes a lot of organization by these smaller markets to do that. And often they don't have the capacity to operate at that level.
Right.
So there really does, we were looking at, there was some larger, I think it was in Philadelphia or Detroit, there were some systems put in place to try to achieve that. So I think this focus of this community market was interesting, because the idea is to have the community feel ownership, not to put small markets out of business, right, and to try to work with them, but also using the market as a way to provide information to the community about health, education, and nutrition. I remember one of the CSA's programs, what they did is they would have classes Friday afternoon for people to learn how to cook the different things that were in the box, because they were all seasonal, and especially during the winter you get different kinds of produce. So but the community comes up with great ideas, and I think that's ultimately is you don't have to go in with a magic idea, but go in with the desire to want to change the status quo. And I think this is where, as we think about equity issues, how do we put the same investment into communities to help bring them together? The California Endowment made an interesting decision a few years ago. It decided to invest in 10 communities, or maybe it was 14, around the state over 10 years, and to look, these were lower income communities of color predominantly, and Richmond was one of the communities. And what they made a decision to do, and obviously the California Endowment is very health based, is to focus their investment on building community capacity in community based organizations and advocacy. And the result of that is why you see so many great smart advocacy in West Contra, Costa, and Richmond, because of this investment in building the capacity for organizations, who then, it's sort of organic community leadership. And whether it's, and what came, for example, coming out of that was a whole effort where in Richmond, we invested in a whole movement to create a source of revenue for children's issues, for children, called Kids First, where a number of community-based organizations came together, and one did a petition to amend the city charter to direct a certain amount of funding to children's services, but didn't only do that, and it passed by over 70%, but didn't only do that, but then I worked with them on this. We came together on a coalition to raise the real estate transfer tax for properties over $1 million to create the funding to support the funding that would come from to supply the funding to the city for these youth services and create an Office of Children and Youth. And I can tell you one of the issues folks focused on was food security. So that investment in community capacity led to literally a change in the city charter, an Office of Children and Youth, and millions of dollars of new money per year. And this is only one example. So I've come to really understand the importance of investing in community capacity, whether it's advocating over an urban farm, over food security, over racial justice issues as they apply in city government or a school district, but that because the community can own that leadership.
Great. Well, that's a perfect segue into introducing our next two guests. We have two guests from organizations that are on the front line of food security. First of all, we have Joleen Lafayette, the Executive Director of Loaves Fishes of Contra Costa. For the past 15 years, Joleen has devoted herself to helping feed the hungry in Contra Costa, first as the Development Director for Loaves Fishes, and now the Executive Director of Loaves Fishes. Welcome, Joleen. And our other guest is Helen Jones, the Food Rescue Operations Manager for White Pony Express. And so let's hear about their organizations, what they do and how they contribute to our whole food security safety net. Joleen, tell us about your program.
Okay. Thank you for having me tonight. I think we were going to start off, Tyler. I was going to show a video of Loaves and Fishes so everybody could just get a peek of what we do.
And he's queuing it up.
Okay.
And he's on mute, so we don't hear him mumbling to himself.
Yeah.
There we go. Cool.
The reason I came to Loaves Fishes was because we did become homeless and we didn't have anywhere to get food. And that's why me and my wife ended up coming here.
Like if I haven't had this place, I'd honestly be like really hungry all the time, like I was before.
We serve individuals who are homeless and very low to low income individuals.
I was working and I had funds and making money, and now I'm disabled and I'm currently buying medication. Medicare doesn't cover everything.
I came to Loaves and Fishes because I became homeless.
Yeah, I'm so glad, so grateful for this place and for all of you, the family. It feels like I found a home here.
Yeah, I always know that Loaves Fishes doors are always open to help out everybody.
Really helps fill a gap, and it's helped me financially a lot.
We're renting a room now, so I'm off the streets. I think the favorite thing I like to do is come in to socialize, be with other people that maybe I can identify with.
The people that work here are really nice. You kind of get to know them, and I don't feel like embarrassed asking for a toothbrush. They ask you, oh, hi, can I get you this? And just like that little kind of positivity that will lift them up.
And I started volunteering just to fill my day. For the last 2 years, I've been on payroll.
They can get food, clothes.
They have everything: dessert, fruits, vegetables. Like, I don't know, it keeps me on a healthy diet, honestly.
Really like the staff. They're really friendly.
Each day I prepare about 600 to 800 meals a day. I like the fact that I'm giving back to the community that once gave to me.
And I feel like I'm helping needy people just by chopping veggies.
What I'm doing today by giving them a good meal, well-balanced meal that they're not hungry, they can go out and I'm hoping to make good choices today.
And believe it or not, some of these clients say, oh, I haven't been hiking in a long time. Thank you so much. You made my day.
Loaves Fishes saved my life, and they're helping like all of you out there right now eating. They're all getting it. So yeah, Loaves Fishes is great. Save a lot of lives.
My commitment is to people that need help. And I feel that feeding them is at least I can do that. We have become a very stable resource of food for individuals over the years. Our newest program is our culinary arts program for individuals that are experiencing some type of barrier to employment. Our goal is to get individuals back to work and working in the culinary industry.
They can start to learn fundamental culinary skills that will be transferable either to a job, or if they decide to pursue it further as a career,
They're definitely spending a lot of their time preparing to send us out in the culinary field.
And we would learn how to cut, how to cook, how to create, and it's just awesome.
Nice. Round of applause.
Yeah. I've seen
That's
that video many times, and I love seeing it every time I see it. And then Tyler, you also have an infographic for Loaves and Fishes. And it kind of
and it was that one. So let me
put that up
do it
on.
again so you can see it.
I've toured your facility in the Antioch, Pittsburgh area. It's very impressive.
Yes. Yeah. So Loaves and Fishes, we've been in the county since 1983. And Mark, you said I've been there 15 years. I've actually been there almost 20 now. So
Okay.
Sounds like I need to update my bio. But our mission is to nourish lives. And how do we do that? Loaves and Fishes, we serve a hot noontime meal Monday through Friday to individuals that are in need of food. We do not do any intake. Anybody is welcome to come to our dining rooms and have a hot meal. Our main focus is to make sure that that meal is healthy. We always have a hot entree with protein in it. We always have a green salad, fruit salad, dessert. In a normal environment, we serve in a communal dining room where our individuals can come in, feel a sense of community, feel a sense of belonging. When it's cold, they can come in and have a cup of coffee, or when it's hot, they can come in and get out of the sun. So we have 5 locations. We just opened one 2 weeks ago in partnership with the Trinity Center in Walnut Creek, which I'm very excited about. But our other locations are in Oakley, Antioch, Pittsburgh, and Martinez. We have the hot meal, but we also provide a food pantry. So individuals can come in, have a hot meal, and take a bag of groceries for themselves or their family who are at home. Last year we served, so this is White Pony, Tyler. I don't know if you have found our infographic yet.
Oh,
There
sorry.
it is. That's okay.
Click the wrong.
That's okay. Last year we served 133,000 meals and provided 357 tons of food. And we're very excited. We're coming close to serving our 5 millionth meal. So like I said, I've been there 20 years and I'm truly amazed at what Loaves and Fishes accomplishes every day. So that's kind of our normal operations. We are operating a little differently now due to the response of COVID-19. I can proudly say that we did not miss a day of meals. We quickly transitioned to a to-go meal. Those meals are served right out the front doors of the dining rooms, along with a bag of groceries. And also in response to the pandemic, we are now serving weekend meals in Martinez, and we'll start serving weekend meals in Pittsburgh on July 11th. We have seen a 50 to 60% increase in the number of meals that we are serving since mid-March. So at first, I have to say it was a little overwhelming, but it's kind of our new normal now, and it's working well. We also do a few other things other than provide meals. We also have a culinary arts program. I won't go into great detail about that, but it's a fabulous program. It fits right into Loaves and Fishes' mission, but it's a 12-week free culinary program where we teach individuals how to cook, and then we place them in jobs after graduation. We also provide food to other nonprofit partners. We provide food to Opportunity Junction in Antioch, Cal State University East Bay, and Mount Iowa Adult School. So we are capturing those students that are experiencing food insecurity. Loaves and Fishes does not discriminate against anybody. Anybody can come up to our doors and have a hot meal. They can go through our food line as many times as they would like. And right now, in a response to the pandemic, if there's a senior at home, their caregiver is welcome to come and pick up a meal for them. If there's a family of 5 that would normally, like John said, be using the school system for food, someone can come to our doors and pick up 5 meals. We develop relationships. Our dining room managers get to know those individuals and say, oh, you got 5 at home, let me give you 5 meals, and come back Friday and we'll give you, a food box. We are great partners with our guest tonight, White Pony Express. We depend on them for our food donations, for our food pantry. And we also have a great relationship with the food bank. They're currently now providing us with the relief food boxes that we are distributing to individuals that are housed. So, in normal operations, Loaves and Fishes is a fabulous volunteer experience, whether you want to bring in your corporate team, or if you're an individual that just wants to, volunteer every week. We're very flexible, but we are a pretty strong volunteer-based organization. We depend on our volunteers.
And that would be at all 5 locations?
Yes.
You can use volunteers at all five locations.
Yeah.
That's great. I remember when you opened in 1983, you were one of our first delivery locations for Project Glean. We would harvest from the neighborhoods and deliver to Loaves and Fishes.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
It was much different than when we first opened, because the food would get delivered and the volunteers would look at what they had and say, okay, what are we going to make with this? Where now we have a big central kitchen in Pittsburgh that we own. And I have a full-time chef there. He prepares all the meals. You saw him in the video. He's also been with Loaves and Fishes probably 18 years. But he prepares all the meals with his staff, and then they're transported out into the community.
Well, this is a nice segue over to White Pony Express, because basically you're there at the front line, Joleen, serving the folks, but as you began to describe, where does the food come from? And often it comes either from the food bank, it comes from White Pony Express. And so Helen, welcome again, and tell us about White Pony Express.
Hi, thank you guys for having me tonight. I really appreciate the opportunity to share what we do at our organization. White Pony Express has been around for we're coming up on our 7th year this September. And the way we came about was our founder, Dr. Carol Whelan Connor, noticed something in her neighborhood. She noticed that there was a lot of grocery stores throwing away food. And she also noticed another thing, that there were people going hungry. So she came up with the idea of White Pony Express to connect the abundance with those in need. And so what we do at White Pony Express is our mission is to end hunger and poverty within the county and bring people from the margins to the mainstream. That's our goal, with dignity and love is one of our core values at White Pony Express. We serve organizations like Loaves and Fishes. They're one of our first organizations that we actually partnered with. And there's many other organizations that we serve within the county. We're able to serve. We don't do direct services, so we partner with other nonprofits that are able to provide those services. So places like recovery homes, or other agencies within the community, or churches that are that have pantries. One of our newest and evolving programs is a school pantry program. And so what Supervisor Gioia was saying about the schools having the insecurity with foods and the children depending on having the breakfast and lunch at school, we actually identify schools that have at least 80% of the students receiving free and reduced lunch. And we reach out to those schools, or they reach out to us, and we establish what we call a school pantry program. And in that program, we bring about 1,000 to 1,200 pounds of food twice a week to the school. And the volunteers at the school set it up like a grocery store, and families are able to go through and freely shop. And so it actually bridges the gap between, them not having any, a lot of the families are receiving food stamps, and food stamps don't last the full month or whatever. And so that kind of bridges that gap and allows them to be able to have food. I had a mom come to me at one of the pantries. She said, I didn't know how I was going to make it. I didn't have any food in my refrigerator, and I didn't know what I was going to do. I don't get paid until Friday. And I said, well, get you some groceries. So she was able to get groceries and take that one less pressure off of her. And so with that, COVID-19, we noticed, all the schools were closed. So these pantries are set up at schools. So there's a lot of adaptations that we had to do at White Pony Express. First of all, the abundance in the grocery store, there wasn't abundance. We didn't have, the grocery stores were cleared. And so we had to be creative and quickly creative with it. We actually reached out to food distributors, the places that normally serve restaurants that were closing down, and they had abundance. And so we went from picking up food at the grocery stores in crates of food to actually receiving pallets of food. Wow. When we first, prior to COVID-19, we were distributing about 5,000 pounds of food a day. We're now up to 10,000 pounds of food per day that we're distributing. With that being said, a lot of our volunteers had a shelter in place because they fell within the age group of that needed to shelter in place. And so a lot of community members stepped up and were able to come in and help us out and continue to help us. And so volunteers are always needed at White Pony Express. Let's see, we also—
I was going to say, you got a couple of videos, right, that you brought?
Yes, we do. We do.
Yeah.
You want to go ahead and start the first video and then we'll continue on?
Yeah. Tyler, you got those queued up? Is there audio?
Should be.
Tyler, you muted.
Close. We're an all-volunteer organization, and there's a real feeling of ownership, and everybody wants to contribute to keep it going.
We're picking up food that would otherwise go to waste. We call it food rescue.
Every single day, we call the shelters, the soup kitchens. We try to design the program to be as responsive as possible to their needs.
One of the tremendous innovations we've created is a mobile boutique. We set up a real store. We make it a joyous event.
When you can just shop freely for your kids, for whatever you need, it's a feeling of empowerment. We really see this as a template that any other community can easily adopt. Every delivery, every time we walk into a shelter, our goal is to walk out of there having helped uplift lives in need.
Very nice.
There's one more video that's actually kind of showing us how our model is now.
Cool. And I recognize one of those dining rooms.
Yeah.
Loaves and Fishes.
Oh, you want to do that other video now, Helen?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, let's do that.
Wait, can't get to the maximizer. There we go.
So yeah, this is actually a video of one of our alternative sites for the school pantries. We set those up throughout the community so families were able to go through and continue to receive food. And so this one is in Antioch, and actually they have about over 800 families a week that they serve there. And this particular day, there was about 300 cars that were given food. And
oh, gee.
See the need there. That's the lineup of people waiting to get food. There's our driver coming in and bringing in the food and showing exactly how, the volunteers are able to bring in all that food. And this wonderful partnership is that what they do is they bring in all the food and then they bag it up and then socially distance and put the bags in the trunks of the vehicles there. You can see some examples of the stuff that we have, that we received and rescued. That's an example of them just putting the foods in the vehicles.
I guess one of the questions I have when we look at this is that you're relying on rescuing food. And this is food that if, in effect, if the retailers could move, they would move because they would profit on it, right? So in a truly 100% market successful environment, there would be no surplus and there'd be nothing to distribute. Is that a reasonable statement?
It is, but a lot of times stores have different inventory that's coming in, and they may not be able to sell that anymore. And it's perfectly fine food or good food, but they're just not able to sell that anymore in their store. So we get stuff like that. So it's a variety of reasons why, or they're just change of seasons, things that didn't sell. But yeah, essentially, yes, if everything was sold in the grocery store, as we saw with COVID-19, there wasn't really much to receive from the grocery stores.
Because that's one of the things I wanted to discuss this evening is the issue of our food safety network, and from all three of your perspectives, are we dealing with and I brought this up during rehearsal, but I'll ask it, are we dealing with this as a response to a grass fire? Are we putting out a fire and not necessarily dealing with the sources of the hunger? The economic insecurity, leads to food insecurity, obviously. And what would be an ideal environment? Is this where we plateau? Is this a service model that we continue to? Is this the way we handle the food needs of folks in need, or is there a model more institutionalized or greater or more preventative? As Larry Slice said, it would be great if the food bank went out of business. What do you have any sense of that model? Do we need more charity gardens like the charity garden in Pittsburgh and the Hap McGee garden down in Danville and Carolyn Finney's Cocoa Sand Farms? I see a lot of vacant land out in Richmond. There's the former greenhouses that were out there. What is it? Colored Spot, had a lot of land and operations out there. How, I know the part of the challenge is that you're dealing with the day-to-day issue of, bringing in the food and so forth. Where are we in terms of looking at the macro longer-term solution, or is that even necessary? Do we have it handled? Any of you have a perspective on that?
I do, actually. I think from the White Pony's perspective is that what we're doing is we're being able to empower families. So families are able to not have to focus on, where they're getting their next meal, so they can be able to become more financially stable. Parents are, the kids are able to fill their stomachs and they're able to focus more in school. So it's a ever evolving situation. So not only are you helping out, the parents, you're helping out the children, which in turn helps your schools be better. And it's just like a whole cycle of things. So I think that by providing assistance is the key to people being able to stand up on their feet. Because like at White Pony Express, we have our mobile boutique, as you saw in the video. There was a gentleman that actually came to the mobile boutique and he was homeless. And he came through there and got a suit from us. And he took that suit. We actually met up with him a couple months later. Some of the volunteers saw him in downtown Pittsburgh and they talked to him. And he took the suit out, went to an interview and got a job and had a full-time job and was no longer homeless. So this is a perfect example of how you can take your resources and empower yourself.
Great. John, from a county-wide perspective, I know you're in District 1, looking at the county as a whole, how do you see the opportunities for improvement in our food security network? Is it strictly community based and nonprofits, or obviously you've talked about the individual merchants coming in and filling gaps and so forth. What would you say to those of us that are, kind of looking at this, trying to get a handle on what's going on and where we go?
I mean, all of these play a role. I mean, I think we have to think about a short-term goal, medium-term goal, and long-term goal. Obviously, collecting food, surplus food is a very efficient thing to do. And because we're in an emergency situation and people need food. I think the long-term goal is creating a system, one, which ends in inequity, income disparity and inequity, so people aren't forced to have to get food through emergency situations. So, I mean, ultimately, that's what we need to all be working toward, right? Is just erasing inequity in our society. But along the way, we're going to need to do many things, right? And these organizations, both here tonight, are doing really great work that's needed. It's, as I said earlier, hearing from the food bank of Contra, Costa, and Solano saying they wish they could be put out of business, right? Isn't that what we're all hoping, where we don't need all of this? I will say one thing before I move on to the longer answer, is that actually collecting food waste can be a good action for climate change. So we're not having producing more food, and because our how we eat, our food behaviors, our how we grow our food, all contributes to climate change. That's a whole separate long discussion itself. But I think that there is really a need to empower communities to also be able to create more local food supply. And I think we're fortunate in Contra Costa. We have a very vibrant agricultural community. Of course, most of that food is exported because it's their businesses to other parts of the state. We're a food basket for many parts of the state. But what we're seeing is a movement of having people take control. So for example, a number of cities, and the county did this, changed our land use ordinances to allow people, for example, to be able to do egg production, and to have hens so that they can produce eggs, or bees for honey. So I think people, and that really came out of the community saying, we want our own supply, and not everybody wants to do that, but we're giving people autonomy to make their choices locally. Whether it's a CSA box. What I didn't mention about Urban Tilth is, in addition to the farm, they're actually running gardens at school sites. And we're actually seeing more community gardens at school sites. So not that all of our food supply is going to be met that way, but we're seeing more and more shift. And what's great about that is you're having this ancillary benefit of not necessarily, we get into this habit of wanting to have berries 12 months of the year, even if they've been flown to us from Chile, right? And think about all the greenhouse gas that goes into that. And so the nice thing about people being empowered on local food supply is you're also not having this food travel long distances with all sorts of emissions and truck traffic to take it here. So I think the long-term objective is ending inequality and equity, but along the way, what we're seeing is this growth of local food supply, and we can meet a lot of needs that way. And it's people doing more home gardens, school gardens, or larger community gardens. And I think it also makes them make wiser food choices, right? Because not everybody can do that. And how do we support community markets? I posted this, I don't know if you want, a 3-minute video that Urban Tilth did on their farm, but it's great because it's their voice talking about this vision of what this means. And if you have time and want to play it, or people want to watch it, I posted it. It's a really, because it's them talking about this issue better than I can.
Well, it's in the chat. Yeah. So
well, I have it queued up if you want to watch it.
Yeah. So carrying this, Helen, I know that you've talked about the food surplus that you get from retail vendors and sources and so forth. How do you interact with individual gardeners and or with urban farmers, the organization called Urban Farmers, who was going to join us, but they had to back out. So give us a perspective on the kind of the non-commercial sources of food. And is this something that you're encouraging? You know, I've always thought most gardeners, you know, grow one zucchini plant because how many zucchinis can you eat? But you've got space for 10, they grow well, you know. Would you encourage more gardeners to grow surplus intentionally? Are you tied in with, you know, I mean, unfortunately, we don't have urban farmers here with us tonight, but Helen, just share a little bit more perspective on that whole urban sources of food, non-commercial.
Yeah, that's a good question. We do actually receive donations from urban farmers, and then also Cocoa Sustainable Farms. Carolyn Finney, she donates to us. We also go out to the farmers markets, and we're able to connect with local farmers that way, and they actually look forward to being able to help, you know, with food insecurity, because otherwise, you know, the stuff, we arrive at the farmers market probably about 30 minutes before they close. We give them the crates, and then the farmers fill them up. You know, we have some farmers that they know it's going to feed hungry people, and they're just so excited to be able to help and be a part of, you know, helping the community, that they give us everything that they have left or whatever. So yes, we do definitely go local. We're also a part of the USDA Farms to Families program, where we receive the produce boxes, and that we're able to distribute those as well to our various partners.
Cool. You know, I know that there's so much surplus in people's backyards. I ran an urban gleaning program for a number of years, and we did a neighborhood tree inventory of one neighborhood in the Walnut Creek area, Los Juntas neighborhood near the Pleasantville BART station. We took an aerial photograph, we did a square area of the whole neighborhood, and we phoned every single household and asked them about their food production. And it turned out that 1 in every 4 households had fruit trees, and the average harvest from those trees was 200 pounds. So there was plenty of stuff there, and that was one small neighborhood. And I remember harvesting 800 pounds of citrus from one grapefruit tree in Martinez, or 600 pounds of citrus oranges from another tree in Antioch. So that brings up, you know, John, you mentioned community gardens. I know that like in Walnut Creek with the Rossmore Gardens and the Heather Farm Gardens and so forth, there's a 2 to 8 year waiting list for community gardening space in some of our cities. And obviously you're not in a position to address that, but there's a demand for additional community gardening space. And from my perspective, I've also looked at aerial photographs of, say, the Pittsburgh area, where a lot of the older neighborhoods have pretty much vacant backyards. And it seems to me that an organization like Urban Farmers or White Pony Express, and together with Master Gardeners or DVC Horticulture, could go on like a citrus tree planting program to where we can establish nutritious, easy to handle citrus fruit in people's backyards. You know, swoop in, plant the tree every month, come around, do some watering, whatever, and that becomes an asset for the entire community as people come and go. Those trees are still there. I mean, we were harvesting trees that were 30, 40 years old. So what I'm looking at is, we've talked at Sustainable Contra Costa about taking the lead on this, but it takes time and effort. Any thoughts on that? Anybody? Using more vacant land or encouraging?
I was going to say, and you wouldn't expect this, but sometimes local zoning ordinances make it difficult. So one of the things we've been trying to do at the county is change zoning to allow this. You would be amazed. So if you have a neighborhood, let's say, that's mostly multifamily, so people can't have their own gardens in their yard. You want to create a community garden for them, right? They have ownership over. We realized that some of the residential zoning prohibits that. So we've actually our work. In fact, we're redoing our general plan right now to make some major changes. But I think this is something we can all advocate for in a local city, is to make sure the zoning allows it. When we got into it, we didn't realize that we had to change zoning that sometimes allows industrial or residential, but doesn't allow a community garden. How crazy is that?
Geez.
So sometimes don't let the city tell you you can't do it. Go to
Right.
the policymakers to get the zoning changed.
Right.
Because believe me, and it's not always intentional, it's just the way it was in the zoning. And to create that, the same thing with allowing, people to have hens in their backyard. I think we need to be able to be flexible. And this is something maybe Sustainable Contra Costa can think about, how to encourage the cities that may have more restrictive zoning to change those things to make it easier for people to locate a community garden.
Because the other angle on some of this is foodscaping, and we had worked with various churches that often churches have extra land or space around their buildings to plant.
You mentioned that we have a fund of money in North Richmond that we a mitigation fund, and we set up a category for community gardens, and a church actually applied for some of that to help create a community garden at their church in North Richmond. So yes, I mean that's a great opportunity. Because
the Jewish synagogue in Walnut Creek had a program for a while, at least, that every graduating class, the youth that were bar mitzvahs or whatever, they would plant a citrus tree on their property, dedicated to that class. And over time, we'd build a small orchard. So anyway, lots of opportunities to take the lead.
Schools there's no reason there can't be a school garden at every school. And those of us in Richmond who know about the history of the Rosie the Riveter, World War II, we have a Rosie the Riveter, as you know, a National Historic Park Museum, and it talked a lot about the victory gardens during World War II that people had, which was people came together. It was like, there was food rationing going on, and people had their own victory gardens at home. And so it's like, I think they're having a movement with school gardens, community gardens, because it brings communities together. When I've gone up to the Maravista Community Garden in El Cerrito, a school garden, it is amazing to see the parents there together with the students, the relationship that happens. And it's not just bringing the food home. It's the relationships and the work that happens there.
Well, and Joleen, I want to bring you into this. I saw your chat there that you have a community garden in Martinez, correct?
We do, and it was donated by Shell probably 3 years ago.
And where's that located?
It's located in the front of the building, and they come every year and replant it.
You're talking about at the Shell refinery there on Pacheco Boulevard?
Yes, but it's the community garden. It's small. It's more of a big flower bed in the front of our building.
Okay. That one. Yes. Okay.
But they're very generous. They have a crew that comes every year and replants it for us. Our other locations, it's not possible at, but and we also get a lot of donations from local growers where they bring in fresh produce, and we put that in our food pantry.
Cool. Well, one of the things I wanted to segue into John's comment about building community, I really see the community that you're creating at Loaves and Fishes locations. I had the opportunity to work on a kibbutz in Israel for a while, and the kibbutzim, are built around community kitchens. And so you go work in the day and you come back and you share a meal with everybody. And it's an interesting idea to, in effect, not think of it as a soup kitchen versus a community kitchen where people come together and they share a meal. It doesn't really matter what the source is or the income is of the source of the food or the money involved. It's a community dining room. And that's a great concept for creating.
I always correct people when they call us the soup kitchen.
Right. Well, thank you for making that distinction. I know I'm guilty of that. And I told you guys earlier that I'm your ignorant local resident needing to learn more about your programs. So, thank you all for sharing what you do. and your perspectives. What I'd like to do now is open up to the audience for questions. It seems that we've had success in the past by letting people ask their own questions. If you've got noise in the background, barking dogs or anything else. But Tyler, are we able to unmute people and ask questions? Does anybody have a question?
I have changed the setting now so that
Cool.
folks should be able to, oh, did I just start sharing my screen?
And Will, you had a question about families in the Richmond Unified School District. I'll let you ask that one if you're still around. And let's see. Yeah, okay. So Will, are you still there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you
Great.
hear me?
Yeah, please ask your question. That'd be great.
So some of our congregations in West County have been doing a food for thought program, especially in the winter break and the spring break for all the kids in Richmond Unified School District, which we know most of them need food. They're food insecure. And that's why the faith communities have been gathering boxes to do in those 2 weeks when we knew that the kids were out of school. What are they doing right now during the shelter in place when the schools isn't open? Are they able to go by and get food from the school?
Yeah.
How are they surviving?
Thanks. Good question, Will. Yes. So many of the school sites are actually have set up their lunch sites at the school for them to pick up as well for their family. I forgot the superintendent mentioned how many thousands of meals they've provided. So yes, that's one thing they did a very good job of. There's also actually a map that was put together. I know we emailed it out a while back that is a countywide GIS map that shows all the locations. It was supposed to be in real time where folks could go on and list where there was free food available. And on that, the school sites were listed on there. So yes, West Contra, there's some other sites as well that this map shows, but West Contra Costa also is serving at all of their, most of their schools. So I passed by Kennedy High School, Dave and Amanda's old high school, where my dad taught every day on my way to my office. And I would see the setup there at the school for the meals.
And can I add something to that as well?
Sure.
White Pony Express with our school pantry program, we actually have regularly 5 pantries that are actually in Richmond. And so because of COVID, the schools were closed. So what we did was we contacted local churches and community centers that were able to be an alternative site for the families. And we directed those families over to those sites so that they're able to go ahead and get food. So we have 3 alternative sites actually spread out through the city of Richmond.
Great, yeah. You know, can I make a comment about
Sure.
the language we use on talking about this? A few years ago, I had a chance to, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation did this event for people involved in issues of healthy eating and food. And they had presented the results of these focus groups. And what they found is that all of us who are familiar with this issue and deal with this issue use language that the general public doesn't always quite understand the full meaning of. So we'll say, oh, we've got to remove barriers to healthy eating. Oh, it's like, what does that mean? Well, we want more farmers markets. We want more access to fresh fruits and vegetables. So it made me think about even the language that we all use. I don't, you know, food insecurity probably is understandable, but some say people are hungry. It's like people, so we have this tendency in our society, I think, to shy away from the descriptive language and use stuff that we all know, and it becomes a term of art. So I wish I had saved that notes from that presentation, but it was very helpful to say, if we're trying to build public support for this stuff, think about what we say that the average person who's not dealing with this issue will understand and support.
Very, very good point. Absolutely great point. Other questions from the audience? And you can just kind of speak up, or I see a hand raised from Sam.
Okay, I have unmuted Sam.
Thank you all. This has been a really interesting discussion. I guess this is a question mainly for Supervisor Gioia, but I would be interested in everyone's thoughts on this. But with the economic downturn, I imagine that there's a huge, maybe a drop off in like funding sources for things that the county is doing, for things that your nonprofit agencies are doing. But you know, what are some alternatives maybe that you might look at? Like, for example, would I know that there are like cap and trade funds available for some nonprofits and for some like agencies working on some of these issues. Maybe they're not traditionally used for for that, but you know, given that diverting food can help reduce methane emissions and indirectly help with climate goals, is that a possibility, or what are other things that might need to be done?
Yeah, I mean, you raise a really good question. Our revenue sources, interestingly enough, decrease at times when the need for the service is increasing, especially at the county level. If you think about a lot of not just property tax revenue, but our state and federal reimbursements, because we depend a lot on that to run programs, go down. So, you know, for example, our social services department gets less revenue from the state because their revenue's down, and yet that's when they have an extra demand on their services. So our revenues aren't aligned with our needs. So that's a really important observation to make. So, you know, and there's no, I wish I could say there's a magic answer to it. There really isn't. I mean, cap and trade funds are interesting use. I mean, I'm actually have a meeting of our California Air Resources Board tomorrow by Zoom that I'm on. And so cap and trade revenues have also been down. And yet it's and they have to be focused in some way on reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and of course our food system is part of that. Not much has been used in that area, although it's been used to help control, you know, working with projects with dairies to control methane emissions and fund some innovative projects so we get less methane emissions, like at the Strauss Dairy. So those kinds of things, they haven't been used to supply food. What I have seen is a stepping up of individual help, where it's amazing the outpouring of community. I honestly believe the business community has a role here to also step up. I know that they're seeing decreases in revenue as well, but there's been a lot we set up, the county has a healthcare foundation that has been taking in contributions to help. So that's one way: philanthropy, business, individual contributions. We shouldn't have to rely on that, but we are seeing more of that right now happen. But it gets to the issue again of how we distribute the resources we have, and they're not aligned to be distributed in the right way. So it's about changing those systems. There's no magical money that's coming that comes up.
So Helen, do you have any closing comments or pitch you'd like to make?
I will say that in response to Sam's question, we did notice a lot of foundations and community partners were actually stepping up and offering, you know, COVID relief funds, which was very helpful considering a lot of expenses do come into play with being able to pick up pallets of food versus crates of food. We've actually distributed 1.4 million pounds since March of food through the Alpha community. And in our almost 7 years of distributing food, we've distributed over 11 million pounds of food. So being a part of that, the greenhouse emissions and all that, reducing that's food that otherwise would be in the landfill. And partners are seeing the importance of organizations like White Pony Express. I see oftentimes people say, well, how are you guys different than the food bank? Well, the food bank is like the post office. They're nationwide, and they're very well needed, and they get things done, and they're doing it fast and efficient. And then there's FedEx. So places like White Pony Express, we're like FedEx. We're also needed, but we do our work in a different way. So we're more local. So just being able to recognize that everybody's piece in it is important, and working together and with the communities and the foundations and people like that, stepping up and being able to encompass what the needs are of the community. And we actually really did notice a culture shock, a system shock when COVID hit. And we actually were able to see our tagline, which is at White Pony, which is all of us helping all of us. And it's being encompassed within our community, and it's awesome just to see it at work. So we are actually in the middle of our spring campaign, actually to the end of our spring campaign, and all donations that are given to White Pony Express will be matched up to $300,000 to June 30th. So
coming up.
Yeah.
Cool. And so great. And Joleen, any comments?
Yeah, I just, like I'll just reiterate that our meal count is up by 68% since mid-March. And Loaves and Fishes, we've seen a large increase because now we're purchasing the to-go containers. We're using a lot of to-go bags, and also developing that weekend staff. But I have felt a huge level of support from our communities, whether it's individuals, foundations, or city grants. Actually, my weekend programs are being supported by each city that they're operating in. But what our concern is right now our funding is well supported with relief funds, but we are concerned about next year, what that looks like. We're at this level, and are we going to continue at this level, and will the funding be there, or will our funders switch to maybe funding housing, employment, and taking the focus off of food insecurity, where Loaves and Fishes is a very strong staple in the community. We're there to provide food, and we're a reliable source. So, and everybody needs food in order to go look for a job. So we continue to need that funding. So that's one of our concerns. We've seen a lot of love and support now, but we hope that continues to keep up with the demand that we're seeing.
Well, and that's a great segue into wrapping up the show. And obviously, White Pony Express is an excellent organization, and Loaves and Fishes of Contra Costa, excellent organization. I personally pledge $100 to each of your organizations, and I want to invite everybody in our audience to join me in supporting the fine work that you guys are doing. So right on. So wrapping up the show, thank you, John. Supervisor John Gioia of District 1 in Contra Costa. Thank you, Joleen Lafayette from Loaves and Fishes of Contra Costa, and Helen Jones for White Pony Express. Appreciate you joining us today and informing us. Thank you very much. And I'm going to yield now to Tyler to share our brief sustainability tip for the week.
Yes, it is brief, and it is not about food.
Okay.
Our tip of the month is always connected to the Cleaner Contra Costa Challenge. And I will say that there are several actions you can do on the challenge that are related to food. In particular, growing some of your own food. So check those out. But if you're not familiar with the Cleaner Contra Costa Challenge, it's a fabulous platform that allows you to do household behavior change, reduce your own carbon footprint, and have fun and connect with other people while doing it, which is really what motivates us, right? That sense of community. So you get to form teams, you get points for your actions. And right now we're running a spring summer challenge where you get prizes for your points. And so one of the actions that we're promoting on that spring summer challenge is this one: bike, walk, skateboard, or unicycle. All you unicyclers out there, I know they threw that in there for fun, but seriously, not driving your car is a major, way to reduce your footprint, travel with zero emissions, and improve your health. So do you have a bike that can be fixed up? Check it out. There are other new options too if you want to invest in something that I might call the excuse busters, like an electric bike or a three-wheeler if you're worried about balance, or a bike share program if you don't want to buy a bike. Depends on where you live, of course. But think about all of those programs, and really, what if it was just one trip a week that you changed from being in the car to being on the bike. But of course, there are other ways to get around. Walking, actually, if you are within walking distance, and hopefully you are, of some places you might like to go, don't forget to just consider that. And yes, even skateboards and scooters. There are lots of safety videos you can watch on YouTube for both kids and adults. And we have some great resources in our area. We have a lot of bike advocacy organizations. Bike East Bay is one of them. They have tons of resources. And right now, 511 Contra Costa is running a really fun summer bike challenge. You get a sort of a card for each city, depending on the city you live in. And you just have to go visit these different places on your bike and check it off the card. It's sort of like bingo, and you get entered into a drawing. So that's fun for the whole family. So there's the website for that. But if you choose this action as a member of Cleaner Contra Costa Challenge, there's a 5-step action plan that talks about all the ways to do this, and you get 900 points for it. So we're going to hear from our community organizer, Colleen Noland, in just a second, and she can help anybody who is not already a member of Cleaner Contra Costa Challenge. So there's your tip of the month.
Great, thank you, Tyler. And yeah, and Colleen, our community organizer for Sustainable Contra Costa, you're going to share briefly upcoming events for us.
I thought I unmuted Colleen, but maybe I didn't. There you go. Try that, Colleen. Okay.
Hello, everyone.
There you go.
I'd like to again say thank you to all of our guests. I've heard of your organizations, but I found tonight really enlightening. So thank you. Here are some updates on important issues and upcoming events that you may find interesting. The first one is that our Leadership in Sustainability Award nominations are due on July 6th. So if you know of any businesses, individuals, nonprofits, government agencies, or schools in your area that are doing excellent work in sustainability, you can nominate them for a chance for them to be recognized at our virtual September event. And nominating is also fast and easy. You can find it all on our website, which is sustainablecocoa.org. We also have Backyard Chickens 101, which will be hosted by our own Tyler. And this will be an online workshop in collaboration with Sustainable Solano. It will be held on June 30th at 7 p.m. It is free, but please register. Finally, we have the next episode of our Sustainability Live show on July 22nd, and this will feature Chris Dundon from Contra Costa Water District. He's actually a 2019 winner of one of our sustainability awards. He's been doing amazing work for decades in Contra Costa County, and he'll be showing us how to drought-proof our homes. He'll cover the top actions you can take inside your home and then focus on improvements you can make to your landscape as well. He will show us how to beautify our yards, improve property values, enhance backyard habitats, and conserve one of our most precious resources, water. And again, if you are interested, please find all the details on these events on our website, sustainablecocoa.org. You can also find them on our Facebook page. This has been Sustainability Live, a production of Sustainable Contra Costa, presented as part of our community education and outreach program. Our goals for this show are to provide you with useful and timely information about all aspects of living sustainably, guided by the 10 One Planet Living principles, and to provide an online community for sharing information and learning together. I'd also like to thank our sponsors, Central SAN, Mount Diablo Resource Recovery, Contra Costa Green Business Program, MCE, the cities of Antioch, Pittsburgh, Martinez, Pleasant Hill, and Walnut Creek, Republic Services, Contra Costa Water District, Eco Mulch, Recycle Smart, and also Contra Costa Center Transit Village. I'd also like to thank tonight's volunteer crew, producer Sam Bowman, director and host Mark Westwind, and technical director Tyler Snordham Phelps. For more information about One Planet Living and all of Sustainable Contra Costa's programs, activities, and special events, please visit our website at sustainablecocoa.org. Your support is always welcome. You can also make a donation on our website.
Thank you, Colleen. And Tyler, tell us about where we can watch this video after we close tonight.
Yes, just one quick thing. I did make a little contact here just to remind you for our guests. You can find Loaves and Fishes there,
There you go.
loavesfishes.org and whiteponyexpress.org. And for John, my recommendation is Google Supervisor John Gioia. It's a long URL, but you'll get to a wonderful webpage that he has. In fact, he has a really cool Facebook page too, with a lot of wonderful events coming up in West County.
Cool.
Thank you all to our guests. So this program will be part of our YouTube channel, and I would say by the end of the day tomorrow, it should be uploaded and you can share it and watch it again. So just when you're on YouTube, just search for Sustainable Contra Costa. And as you can see, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram, and send any questions or comments to the info@ email address. And don't forget, cleanercontracosta.org.
Great. Well, thank you all once again. Thank you, guests. Thank you for to our audience. We'll see you next time.
All right. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.